finals of 2016 ACF Nationals. As you probably already know, ACF has the banned final rule. Michigan is one up on Chicago in this best-of-3 series. So if Michigan wins either the first game or the second game, they're the champion. Chicago has to win both games to win the tournament. We will start reading unless anybody has any questions. Yeah, you have a question? I have a question. You don't have a question. Ha! Sorry, I'm old, so I'm just going to be old people. Let's do a buzzer check. What? You're good. Okay. We will start. Round 1 of the finals. Toss of 1. Any viscid flow which possesses this property must possess an inflection point in the velocity profile according to a theorem of Rayleigh. Analysis of the Taylor-Goldstein equations showed that a stratified shear flow which possesses this property must have a Richardson number of less than 1/4. Experimentally, plain Couette flow can exhibit this property despite theoretical analysis indicating it is always absent. For a plane inviscid flow with this property, Howard showed that the eigenvalues of the governing equation are bounded in a semicircle in the upper half plane centered around the average of the minimum and maximum phase velocities. For a wave propagating in a fluid, this property occurs if the wave's frequency has a positive imaginary part. This property is possessed by a flow acted on by a perturbation with a positive growth rate. For 10 points, what phenomenon can be caused by shear due to velocity discontinuity at an interface between two fluids? In an example, namely instability. I just said that. Oh my God, here's your bonus. Answer the following about months of British history in the early Middle Ages for 10 points each. The better will be discussed, remembered for this 5-book work, completed around 731 CE, that praises Edwin of Montgomery as the ideal Christian king.
Including actual history.
Yes. This Welsh monk from St. David's Abbey is best known for writing a life of King Alfred the Great in 893 CE, after he was invited to Alfred's court and given the monasteries of Conversbury and Banwell. Yes. This Celtic monk from Royce is a key source for Britain during the 5th and 6th centuries. He blasts rulers like the tyrant King Vortigern for inviting in the Saxons and sealing the doom of the nation in his work, De Excidio Britanniae, or On the Ruin of Britain. What? Answer. Gildas, you get 20 points. Toss of 2. This artist took over 40 years to complete a painting in which 3 cupids, including one with a mirror, surround the title figure, who stands in the Pudica pose. Another mythological scene by this artist was intended as a compliment to Paul de la Roche's The Assassination of the Duke of Guise, and uses flowing green, blue, red, and orange cloths to depict the title figure's love for his stepmother Stratonice. In another of this artist's paintings, the Snow King Starno is surrounded by 4 maidens as Malvina reaches out for the hand of a character who's slumped over his heart. This artist of Venus Anadyomene, The Sickness of Antiochus, and The Dream of Ossian also made a painting in which a huge eagle looks on as a suppliant nymph reaches up to stroke the beard of an enthroned dog. Yep. Your bonus. This operation for a general observable A can be computed by sandwiching A between the wave function and its complex conjugate and integrating the result. For 10 points each, name this operation in quantum mechanics, which gives the average result of measurements in a given observable performed on particles with the exact same quantum state. Yeah. In the ground state quantum harmonic oscillator, the expectation values of these 2 operators both equal h bar times omega divided by 4. In the quantum harmonic oscillator, one of them is proportional to position squared, while the other is proportional to the Laplacian.
Oh, I see. It's like the kinetic and potential energy.
Correct. For an operator A in a mixed state represented by a density matrix rho, give the formula for the expectation value of A.
Okay. The trace of the log of...
No. Trace of rho A.
Okay.
Next topic. The main character of this work uses resins from the tree of the world and the china clay of Tabati to make glistening flower pots. After a cow is murdered in this novel, a bezoar inside its stomach is believed to give prophecies. Its title character once owned an ivory pen named the Loco Solo, which destroys paper when used for writing. Helen Lane's translation of this novel ends with a final compiler's note written by Policarpo. A handwritten note stating, "On the occasion of my death, I order that my corpse be decapitated," is found pinned to a cathedral at the beginning of this surreal novel, which largely consists of dialogue between the title character and his secretary. Published 14 years after its author's first novel, Son of Man, it fictionalizes the life of Dr. Francia. That's 10 points. Your bonus. One essay in this volume describes a master plan for Yokohama that uses a continuous and formless method of planning that resembles the title Programmatic Lava, for 10 points each. Name this book, which contains essays such as Islam After Einstein and the poem Learning Japanese. Bruce Mao partly designed this book, whose entries are arranged chronologically within the title categories. Answer? SMLXL. SMLXL was written by this theorist who called Manhattan the 20th century's Rosetta Stone in his book Delirious New York. His firm OMA designed the Seattle Central Library. Yes. Koolhaas designed the McCormick Tribune Campus Center, which is topped by a huge tubular metal train tunnel for this American university. Its SR Crown Hall, like much of the rest of its campus, was designed by Ludwig Mies van der Rohe. What do you got? It's IIT. 10 points. Toss of 4. In the largest collection of poems about this character, he meets his death after he jumps out of his bathtub to pursue a golden stab. After this character encounters a rose garden surrounded by a magical thread, he saves his vassal from losing both his right foot and left hand to the dwarf king Lorik. This man saves a maiden claiming to be a personification of good luck in the poem The Monster, which ends with him journeying to Ruinay to fight dragons until the Day of Judgment. A 13th century poem about this character ends with him hopping onto a gigantic black horse that takes him to hell. This character is mentored by Hildebrand and holds Hagen and Gunther prisoner in the Song of the Nibelungs, where he is presented as an ally to King Atli. In most High Germanic stories about him, he's exiled from his native Verona by Ermenric and fights with Siegfried. For 10 points, name this mythical version of Theodoric. That's what we do.
Dietrich.
That's right. Here's your bonus. Identify the following works of Ranulph Williams for 10 points each. The pentatonic scale figures heavily into the solo passages of this composition for violin and orchestra, in which the cadenzas depict the flutterings of the title Avian. It was based on a George Meredith poem. Answer. Correct. Text from John Bright's Angel of Death speech and Walt Whitman's poems Beat, Beat, Drums, Reconciliation, and Dirge for Two Veterans appear in 4 of the 6 movements of this 1936 cantata. Answer.
No.
Dona Novus Pacem. A duet between an oboe and the solo viola opens this 1925 composition that also features a wordless choir. Its 6 movements are each headed by a quotation from the Song of Solomon. Say again?
Third.
No, it's Flo's copy. Okay, that's 10 points. Toss of 5. After becoming president of the Parvin Foundation, this man was investigated due to a sale of stock in the Flamingo Hotel being linked to the monster Meyer Lansky. This man courted scandal by marrying the 23-year-old Kathleen Heffernan and by recusing himself from the obscenity trial of the Swedish film I Am Curious Yellow, after it was revealed that the allegedly pornographic Evergreen Review had printed this man's book, Points of Rebellion. This author of the memoir of Men and Mountains wrote an off-cited dissent in Sierra Club v. Morton, asserting that trees should... That's right. Your bonus. Answer the following about Carol John Daly, a writer who created amusingly named characters such as Detective Satan Hall and 3-Gun Terry for 10 points each. John Sutherland credits Carol John Daly's story, The False Burton Combs, with pioneering this style of detective fiction, which refers to detectives who are tough, like a certain type of cooked foodstuff. indeed. In a letter to Carol John Daly, this author stated that yours was the only style of writing that ever influenced me in any way. His detective Mike Hammer stars in such books as I, the Jury, and Kiss Me Deadly. Correct. Carol John Daly's stories were often published in this pulp magazine, like the Parisienne and Saucy Stories. It was started by George G. Nathan and H.L. Mencken to help fund the publishing of the Smart Set. Answer.
Fantastic story.
It was called Black Mask, 20 points. Toss-up 6. This noun appears in the title of a short piece that opens with a rising and falling theme in the right hand that goes B, E, A sharp, high B, G, E, before the left hand begins playing a tremolo alternating between B flat and A natural. Two unusual 7-note chords end that Franz Liszt piece, whose title shares this noun with a song whose English lyric adaptation is often called the bluest kind of blues. A movement with this title features italicized. With this title features an F-sharp major interlude marked un più anime that is dominated by flute and harp. That movement with this title opens with a melody played by the clarinets and bassoons before the cor anglais enters playing a theme that begins with a rising triplet starting on G sharp. A song first recorded in 1940 by the Quintet du Hot Club de France shares this title.
Nuage.
That's right. Your bonus. This term was coined by Cabinet Minister Alan Huguet, or Hayek perhaps, at a National Party conference in 1977. For 10 points each, name this economic policy adopted in New Zealand by Prime Minister Robert Muldoon, which caused the country to run up large deficits by borrowing overseas money for expensive projects like the Clyde Dam. Answer? Think big. Robert Muldoon was accused of violating the Glenn-Douglas Agreement by allowing this event to proceed, leading to incidents like the Molesworth Street protest.
Spring golf tour.
Correct. During the Molesworth riot, protesters held up photographs of this South African massacre. It took place in the 1963 demonstration at a police station near Vereeniging against past laws, resulting in bloodshed not marched until the Soweto uprising 16 years later. That is correct. Toss-up 7. This longtime atheist authored a scrapbook addressed to the Chinese statesman Li Hunchan, in which he apologized for the fact that European missionaries were dumb enough to believe in devils and ghosts. In order to prevent fires and get rid of rats at a local flour mill in Crayford, this man developed the first sprinkler system and the first resetting mousetrap. This man, whose son of the same name wrote a biography of him entitled A Genius in the Family, also built an amusement park ride called the Captive Flying Machine at Blackpool Pleasure Beach to fund his failed research on airplanes. His best-known invention was financed by and sometimes named for Albert Vickers. That invention was,
Gatling.
incorrect. Nice one. That invention was first used during the Emin Pasha relief expedition and then developed for use during the Matabele War and the Battle of Omdurman. His invention was a rival to the design of Benjamin Hotchkiss and used recoil force to improve upon the crank that was needed to operate the Gatling gun. What's name? This man who invented the first fully automatic gun.
Maxims.
That's right. Your bonus. Artificial nourishment is used when this concept indicates that a bleach has a negative value or deficit of a namesake substance for 10 points each. Name this concept, which is used to keep an account of the sources and sinks of a bleach. Oh, bleach. I'm sorry, not bleach. Bleach, not bleach. Give me a few more seconds. Right. Answer. Okay, it's called the sedimentary budget. I'm sorry, I misread that as bleach. Okay, sand is often deposited on a beach by this process, which uses a combination of wind and swash to create a zigzag distribution of sand. What do you got? Say again? No, it's called longshore drift. These beachy components, which are juttings of sand into water, are formed primarily through longshore drift. When they attach to an island, they become known as a tombolo. What do you got? That's right. Toss up 8. Keith Hollingsworth's book about the literature of this place notes that the first of the Bon Gaultier papers contains a series of parody poems by Theodore Martin, including The Faker's New Toast, entitled Flowers of Hemp, or The Garland of This Place. At the end of an essay titled partly For This Place, a man is reminded of his childhood schoolbook by the torn and soiled Bible he's handed, and is haunted by the tolling of a bell that signifies 7, then 6 remaining hours. William Harrison Ainsworth's Jack Sheppard and Edward Bulwer Lytton's Eugene Aram are among the many novels based on stories from the calendar named for this place. It's likely that most of Le Morte d'Arthur was written while Thomas Mallory was in this place, a visit to which was described in a Charles Dickens essay. A character is reunited with her Lancashire husband Jenny after returning to this place. That character's mother escaped this place by pleading her belly. For 10 points, it's birthplace of Mall Flanders and notorious London.
Newgate.
Your bonus. In the preface to this novel, a character states that he's proud to think that his puppets have given satisfaction to the very best company in this empire. For example, each identify this book, which begins with the preface Before the Curtain, in which the manager of the performance presents the story of a place full of making love and joking, laughing, and the contrary. We got Vanity Fair. In Vanity Fair, Thackeray contrasts this heroine with the kind of Amelia Sedley. She marries Rawdon Crawley, who collects life insurance money to retire to death with her friends. Yes, Becky Sharp has an affair with this character for whom she plays Clytemnestra in a charade. Since this character's son is insane, he's worried that his grandchildren will also be threatened with hereditary madness. Bring it. It's Marquise of Steyne.
Oh, it is down.
Okay, 10 points. Toss of 9. Lattice theory is used to prove that these systems output a Boolean algebra isomorphic to the ones generated by Turing machines. John Myhill devised the first deterministic machines that accept the class of these systems, though it was Lawrence Landweber who first proved the result about acceptance. One of the two results named for the Immermann-Slapezeni theorem holds that these systems are closed under the complement operation. These systems can be made lambda-free by writing them in Kuroda normal form. They are equivalent in power to a version of Turing machines that employ left and right angle bracket symbols called linear bounded automata. They correspond to type 1 languages on the Chomsky hierarchy. The defining characteristics of these non-contractile systems is that the left-hand side of a production rule may have terminals and non-terminals. For 10 points, name these grammars that can be used to define more languages than context.
Grammars that do have context. Context parameters.
I would say no. Okay. That these grammars that can be used to define more languages than context-free languages.
Context sensitive.
That is the answer. Michigan. In a 1911 book by this name, by Hans Heinz Ewers, concerns a title of female bird when the mad Professor Jakob ten Brinken impregnates a prostitute in his lab. For example, it's each. Name this German word, which refers to a type of mandrake plant set in the Middle Ages to grow from men hanged on the gallows when their blood or semen drips down and impregnates the ground. This plant then develops into a humanoid form, which represents the last bit of humanity in a hanged man.
Yeah.
Definitely could be.
What you got? This is called Alrane, or Alrane, perhaps. Unfortunately, the Alrane is not discussed in this man's essay, The Metamorphosis of Plants, in which he used 123 numbered photographs of Linnaeus to argue that plant organs developed from the leaf, inspired by his own discovery of the intermaxillary bone. No, it's Goethe. Pretty sure they were not photographs. Say that. When this man's eyelids hit the ground, the first tea plants sprang forth so that Chinese people could stay awake during Zazen. This Buddhist monk is known as the first patriarch and is credited with bringing Zen Buddhism to China.
Voted on.
Darwin's 10. Okay, toss of 10. I believe we'll have a score check, despite the fact that you can all see the score on the board. Actually, we'll pause for maybe 3. One member of a family with this name was imprisoned by her son Albrecht II because he opposed her second marriage to Hugh of Arla. who escaped the castle himself by swimming off a rope. A historian with this first name wrote an epoch history of Emperor Maurice and an account of Khosroes II while serving as prefect and imperial secretary for Emperor Heraclius. That Byzantine historian had the last name Sibakata. The founder and namesake of this dynasty had a daughter, Marozia, who was attacked by Liutprand of Cremona for taking the title of Serenissima Vestaratrix and Senatrix. This dynasty included John XII, who was deposed at a council called by Otto the Great. The influence of this family characterized a period called the Saeculum Obscurum, which began a few years after Formosus was put on trial in the Cadaver Synod. It's named this family of counts from Tusculum, who dominated the
Theophylact.
Yeah.
For 10 points each, answer the following about the Japanese underworld. Izanami dies in the sense of the underworld after she gives birth to this kami of fire. This kami very quickly joins her there too, since Izanagi immediately kills him. That's right. This legendary hero, supposedly of the Kofun era, once ventured to Tokoyo, the Japanese underworld, to retrieve immortality-granting Tachibana fruits for his emperor Suinin. Upon returning, this hero died and was thereafter worshipped as the kami of sweets. It's Tajima Mori. This record of ancient matters contains both of those stories about the underworld. Basil Hall's translation of this text and beginning into the Nihon Shogi is why Cicero is sometimes called his swift impetuous meal of Augustus. That is 20 points. All right, yeah. 71-70. Okay. Both teams ready for Gospel 11? All right, here we go. A poem compares the finite infinity of the polar privacy of this entity with the solitude of space, a solitude of sea, and the solitude of death. This thing dances like a bomb abroad and swings upon the hours, in a poem in which a goblin caresses her freezing hair. In that poem, this thing has moments of escape and also has bandaged moments. In a third poem, this entity notes the chariots pausing at her low gate and eventually closes the valves of her attention like... That's right. Your bonus, this paradox, which is named for a physicist, concerns a box that has either nothing or $1 million in it, and an open box that is guaranteed to have $1,000 in it for 10 points each. Name this paradox in which a predictor guesses the player's choice and always puts $1 million in the closed box if he predicts the player will go for only one box. The predictor will put $0 in the closed box if the player goes for both boxes. This is called the Newcomb paradox. This philosopher presented Newcomb's paradox in an essay in his book Socratic Puzzles, which shows that either the principle of dominance or the principle of expected utility will lead to different choices.
Yeah.
Correct. Newcomb's paradox is basically a conundrum about the logical form of this doctrine, which holds that all events are predetermined. In a philosophical novel by Denis Diderot, a character named Jacques holds this philosophy. That is 20 points. Toss-up 12. One album titled For This Location features a 10-minute 3/4 swing arrangement of the Mongo Santa Maria tune Afro Blue. That Coltrane album features the song Alabama, which was written as a tribute to the victims of the 16th Street Baptist Church bombing. Maynard Ferguson created a dream band named for this location. Art Blakey's performance here with Curly Russell, Lou Donaldson, Clifford Brown, and Horace Silver led to 2 Blue Note albums titled A Night at This Location. The lyrics down in... Your bonus. Walter Reppe used the nickel 2 catalyst to perform this type of reaction as well as an even more insane procedure which forms cyclooctatetraene in a single step for 10 points each. Name this reaction used to prepare benzene derivatives, which is called a 2 + 2 + 2 cycloaddition despite being metal catalyzed and not actually paracyclic. We got
Alcyon.
This is alkyne trimerization. This class of actually paracyclic reactions involves ring closures in which a new sigma bond is formed as a pi bond is lost, or ring openings where a new pi bond is formed as a sigma bond is cleaved.
No, they said that, like another kind of thing.
We got
Sigma program.
electrocyclic reactions. Paracyclic reactions can be classified as thermal or of this type, which indicates that the reaction is catalyzed by light.
Photolytic. Photochemical.
Sure.
Yeah.
10. Toss up 13. Brillouin's theorem explains why CIS wave functions do not account for this phenomenon in the ground state, while CISD and CISDT wave functions do. Energy induced by this phenomenon is increased by the formation of a Fermi heap and reduced by the formation of a Fermi hole. Tom Dunning developed a type of basis set which is said to be consistent with the presence of this phenomenon. The dynamic form of this phenomenon can be modeled using the coupled cluster method. This phenomenon's namesake energy is defined as the difference between the exact energy of the system and the energy computed using the Hartree-Fock method. The Schrödinger equation for the helium atom is non-separable because this phenomenon produces a nonlinear term proportional to 1 over the difference between 2 radii. For 10 points, name this phenomenon caused by Coulombic interactions between particles outside the nuclei of atoms.
Electron interactions.
Crunchy.
Let's say electron emulsion.
That's just Here's your bonus. Lord Byron translations of this author's longest poem began, in the beginning was the word next God. What God was the word was no less E. For 10 points each. Named this court poet to Lorenzo de Medici, who wrote an incredibly long epic poem in which a giant named Morgante is converted to Christianity. Luigi Pulci. Luigi Pulci's character of Morgante travels with this knight whose fury titles a poem about him by Ludovico Ariosto. In Orlando Furioso, this character travels to the moon after Orlando loses his wits. While at the moon, this character finds many jars that contain lost things, including the lost brains of many people. We got a stall food. 10 points. Toss-up 14. Practitioners of this technique include Stephen Comsey and Stephen Whitty, whose study of 10 subjects in San Francisco found that it consists of 7 stages ending in disengagement. An extension to this technique called the 4 steps method, developed by J. Conrad Stettwater, was praised by Alice Miller for addressing this practice's flaws. The founder of this technique wrote that humans have 3 lines of consciousness, which lead to 3 levels of imprinting. Thomas Videgaard wrote a report on the success and failure of this technique, which was described in books such as The Biology of Love and one subtitled Toward a Real World. It was first discovered on a patient known as Danny Wilson when he fell down to the floor and started convulsing while yelling out, "Mommy, Daddy." This technique, now practiced at the Namesake Center in Santa Monica by its
Primal scream.
Here's your bonus. This thinker's final book, Stranger and Friend, The Whaling Anthropologist, analyzes proper fieldwork procedure and observation methods for 10 points each. Name this anthropologist whose time spent in the Copperbelt region of northern Rhodesia resulted in the book Coppertown, but who may be best known for an 1850 study about how the film industry has altered human values entitled Hollywood, The Dream Factory.
Oh shit. Who did that? It's not the Powdermaker, right?
I have no idea what it is.
He's known for it all, so that's wrong.
Answer?
Powdermaker.
Yeah. Powdermaker was inspired to make a trip to Africa after reading Bronislaw Malinowski's introduction to this 1938 study into Kikuyu people, which was written by future President Jomo Kenyatta. The transition from collective memory to photography and then to film was discussed by Powdermaker, echoing the work of the sociologist who wrote The Masked Ornament and a psychological history of German film from Caligari to Italy. 30 points. Toss of 15. During a late portion of this military campaign, a friendly chief advised the army to tie bags around the feet of his horses so the horses would not sink to their bellies in the snow. That army had to live upon cattle stolen from the Teotians as it navigated through the country of the Chaldees, filled with barbarians who were set to sing and dance as the enemy approached. The Central Army in this campaign chose Chrysippus as its commander after several of its officers were led into a tent during a feast and decapitated by...
So like the Irish expedition of the 10,000.
Good job. Bonus. This politician, who rose to prominence as director of the National Bank, drafted a private letter to Joachim von Ribbentrop in which he promised not to reach a separate peace with Russia. For 10 points each, name is Prime Minister of Finland, who resigned and was replaced by Karl Mannerheim in 1944. What do you got? His name is Risto Ryti. Ryti was the prime minister during the later part of this conflict, which included the Battle of Rate Road and was followed by the continuation of war. Yes, Ryti opposed this fascist movement of Finland, which used a blue shield emblem featuring a person riding a bear holding a stick. Named for a town in western Finland, this movement led by General Walenia dominated the government in 1931, causing it to outlaw communism.
Sure.
It's the Lapua movement, so you get 10 points on this. Okay?
3/4, right?
3/4 mark, we got 150.
Yeah.
Okay, anyone here? Oh, toss-up 16. Charles Lohr cataloged 298 separate commentaries on this text that were published during the Middle Ages, including John of Jandune's Questions, which discusses if accidents could induce degeneration. Nicole Oresme was made the Bishop of Lisieux for translating this text for King Charles V, and his translation includes an analytical table of contents to call attention to many things worthy of note in this book. Its fourth and final section begins by noting that heavy bodies move naturally toward their center, while light bodies move naturally away from it. This book posits a substance that is neither subject to generation nor corruption, that exists beyond the sublunary sphere, to explain the motions of the most perfect,
Guide to the perplexed?
no, it's not. The most perfect realities. For 10 points, name this cosmological treatise, which posits a fifth element called ether, a book written by Aristotle. Your opponent. In this technique, a glass pipette with a very small tip is held next to a membrane, and a small amount of suction is added to press a small section of the membrane to the pipette for 10 points each. Name this technique, which thus can be used to study individual ion channels, since all the ions transported across the channel will flow into the pipette for analysis. Correct. Patch clamp is often used to study these cells in which voltage-gated ion channels allow for electrical signals to be propagated down the axon in the form of action potentials. Indeed, in general, the motion of ions under both a concentration gradient and a voltage gradient is described by this equation, which essentially adds an electrophoresis term to Fick's law. It can be used to derive the Goldman-Hodgkin-Katz equation. No, it's the Nernst-Planck equation. 20 points. Class of 17. This novel's protagonist is not surprised in the incompetence and failure of science and of fire after visiting the mechanic Herr Spieghalter. Though after the protagonist Baron Jaffet breaks a razor, he is angered. A notary named Cardot asks this novel's protagonist if his last name is O'Flaherty, since he would be the sole heir of Major O'Flaherty, and a wab who left him a massive fortune. As a youth, this novel's protagonist loses much of his fortune when the Comte de Villele becomes a prime minister. He later pursues Countess Theodora to enter high society. While at the spa town of Aix-les-Bains in Savoy, this novel's protagonist wins a duel that he tried intentionally to lose. A curved line from Church to Shandy opens this novel, in which
It opens like the wild asses skin.
Your bonus. Edwina Dum illustrated this author's Two Gentlemen and a Lady, a delightful collection of short stories about doggies for 10 points each. Named this cantankerous cultural critic, whose other books include While Rome Burns, which championed his good friend Harpo Marx, and includes his essay about overseas soldiers, Hands Across the Sea. What do you got? Yeah, that's Alexander Wolcott. Alexander Wolcott inspired the title character of this play, in which Sheridan Whiteside slips on a patch of ice and causes mayhem for the Stanleys.
Man came to dinner.
Correct. Wolcott was also a member of this literary group. His other members included Dorothy Parker. His name for a New York City hotel. That is right. Cost of 18. This man ran a government in exile from the Shoreham Hotel, where he had an entire floor and enclosed glass balcony to fly his nation's flag. After being diagnosed with tuberculosis, he recorded a farewell speech called Message to My People, asking everyone to work together for a better world, but then lived another 20 years. The open Open Doors movement in Israel celebrates that this man, together with Paul McNutt, approved a plan allowing over 1,000 Jewish refugees to enter his country. His nation's constitution required him to be succeeded after 8 years by his vice president Sergio Osmania, which he resisted for a time. A year before he rose to power, he fought for passage of the Titans-McDuffie Act as the leader of the Nacionalista Party, which also included his later successor, Manuel Rojas. He also founded a city that became the national capital from 1948 to... Willie Person Mango, a senator from North Carolina, would have become president if this disaster had killed sitting president John Tyler. Each named the 1644 disaster, which had long gone called the Peacemaker, as waves a ship exploded, killing Secretary of State Abel Upshur and others. Yes, Tyler survived because he was below deck, as was this woman whose claim to fame may be sitting on the roof of the White House as First Lady and watching the Battle of Bladensburg and rushing downstairs to save Gilbert Stuart, portrait of George Washington, in the ensuing fire. We got Miss Commodore built the Peacemaker gun that blew up in the Princeton disaster, but he was cleared of blame. He's also remembered for replacing John Sloat as the commander of the U.S. Pacific Squadron and using his flagship, the USS Congress, to battle in Alta California. We got Robert Stockton. That is 10 points on bonus. The founder of this religion died in a building called Temple for the Defense of the Nation by means of the King of Doctrines, a monastery on a mountain which he converted. In this religion, a blindfolded acolyte would drop a flower to establish contact with Dainichi Nyorai during the Ketchian Kanjo ritual. This religion's founder represented the phenomenal aspect of the womb world as the transcendental aspect of the diamond world by creating 2 mandalas often found in places of its worship. This is Bon? It is not. The Dhyaniki Sutra and the Kondo Chu Sutra are the 2 main texts of this religion, which emphasizes the eternal Mahavairoshana aspect of a certain figure. The founder of this religion is believed to have invented hiragana when he was spreading it to his teacher Kuriko. For 10 points, the esoteric True World Buddhist sect founded by the monk Kukai, which died in Japan starting in the 9th century. No, it's Shingon Buddhism. And the last Reeves et al. Isolated a pyrophosphate-dependent form of this enzyme found in the cytosol of some plant cell. Whether a positive or negative effector binds to this enzyme changes whether or not its R162 or Blue 161 residue faces the active site. A mutation in this enzyme's gene leads to a rare glycogen storage disease called GSD7 or Tarui disease. A second isoform of this enzyme forms a homodimer with FBase2 and is responsible for creating an activator of the first isoform of this enzyme. It's not hemoglobin, but phosphoenolpyruvate and citrate combine to this tetrameric enzyme, causing it to shift from the active R state to the inactive T state. In a classic example of feedback inhibition, this strongly exergonic enzyme is allosterically activated by AMP and inhibited by ETP, causing cells to only produce... Yeah, that's right. Your bonus. The poet Carl Einstein coined the term for this movement, which he called heroic, for 10 points each. He named this phase of an art movement that lasted from around 1909 to 1911, in which subjects were reduced down to their geometrical components. Its participants painted works like Portrait of Bollard and Violin and Palette during its violin.
What's the later one? What's the non-synthetic one? Synthetic.
It's analytic. Yeah. Carl Einstein noted that analytic cubism was practiced by these 2 artists and that their individual styles became indistinguishable. During analytic cubism, these 2 painters would often not sign their paintings so as to confuse the general public. This French art dealer was the subject of a portrait by Picasso during his analytic cubist phase. He wrote one of the first books on cubism and was largely responsible for financing cubist artists. We got it. Daniel Henry Kahnweiser. That is it. That is it.